Good morning. First, I would like to thank Pastor Staki for this opportunity to be able to preach to you this Sunday morning. So we are there in Acts chapter number 1. I'm going to read to you verse number 3, starting verse number 3. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And the title of my sermon this morning is Takeaways from the 2024 Cebu Mission Trip. Takeaways from the 2024 Cebu Mission Trip. So I kind of have this idea in advance because we are informed that Pastor is going to visit Cavite in this day, August 4th. So I actually wrote this sermon. Not wrote this sermon, but conceptualized this sermon during the mission trip as well. So I was thinking of a good sermon idea, and then, if I don't have an opportunity to preach for within the next 2 months, then I'm not going to preach the sermon because it's kind of off to your memory. But since it's almost like 1 month after we went to Cebu, so it's like a little bit of refresher, stuff like that. And also, disclaimer, okay? So these are the things I learned, realized, and reminded of during our stay in Cebu for almost 1 week, okay? So you might have a different set of your takeaways, and that's okay. But I think we can all learn from these takeaways that I have. So basically, our group, there are 3 of us, okay? So we're the rogue team of the Cebu mission trip. So basically, we didn't stay within Cebu area alone. So we visited like islands, which are like it would take you about 2 hours away from Cebu. So we visited the Negros Island and also the Bohol Island as well. So we did that, but we didn't miss the church services. So basically, we joined the soul winning, we traveled, and then we were back in midweek service, and then we end up until Saturday in Cebu. So turn to Ecclesiastes chapter number 10. Ecclesiastes chapter number 10. So this is a practical sermon, okay? So the goal of our itinerary, so to speak, is that we can join the Cebu mission trip, and also we can enjoy these beautiful places within the Visayas region. Obviously, that's only limited to the Central Visayas. And also go as many locations so that we can do soul winning in the neighboring islands as well. So that's our goal. So 2 guys signed up to be my companions during that trip. If I don't have any companion, maybe I won't dare to go to these areas. But since I have these guys with me, so I'm kind of confident. Okay, going to these areas. And also, just a little bit of background. So we speak the language within the region. So basically, we are confident traveling from island to island without even really have to really think about our accommodation and stuff like that. So we're a little bit confident in this area, so we can just move from island to island, okay? So point number 1 is this: we are not invincible. We are not invincible. So one realization I realized is that we are not invincible. Okay, so what's being invincible? Okay, so we can use a analogy like a sports team. For example, in sports teams, they call these sports teams who hasn't gone a loss through the whole season, they title them the Invincibles. Means that nobody has really beaten them. And one thing I am reminded of during the Cebu mission trip is that we are not invincibles. Okay, we can be beaten or we can be hindered if we are not careful. So one thing that we are not invincible of is in the area of soul winning. Let me first say this, okay? So we had a great result in Cebu, okay? You might think that's a small number, but actually that was a big number. You might be thinking or you might expect like we had 1,000, and some of you maybe are positive about that. But for me, after 1 day, after our soul winning in Cebu, so my expectations is around 500, okay? So most of the crew who joined the soul winning in Cebu is from our church, right? We had our host church there, Faith and Verity, but our church, as I can remember, we only talked, the group that we talked to is like a group of 4. So we don't found any bigger groups that we can count. And even though some in our group, they talk to a group of four, but they still count like one salvation out of that group. Okay, so it's a pretty conservative number. Okay, so we have 464 salvations for the course of the whole week with 50 soul winners. And I would agree as well. So Pastor obviously preached of the experience a week after. So I would agree with the language barrier. So I'm going to talk about that since we also experienced it firsthand. Ecclesiastes 10:10, if the iron be blunt and he do not whet the edge, then must he put to more strength. But wisdom is profitable to direct. So example, you're felling down a tree. So you have an axe, and then the axe is dull. So maybe it's blunt, right? So you have to whet the edge. So what is a whet? It's we have a tool in workshop called the whetstone, okay, hasaan in Tagalog. So really have to sharpen the edge, because if you're felling down a tree, you are giving so much effort if the axe is blunt. And it also not only takes much effort, it takes so much time as well. So in soul winning, you also want to be effective, right? You don't want to be presenting the gospel for over an hour to somebody, and at the same time, you are exerting so much effort. Because you know what? You just think like soul winning is, we're going out there and giving the gospel, holding our Bibles, but actually it takes so much resources to our body. It's so tiring if you're giving the gospel, and sometimes if you're giving the gospel and somebody, the person you're talking to is not listening. So it takes a lot of resources, okay? So since for us, we think like we're invisible, because in this church, we got used to do soul winning. Every time soul winning, our vacations, we send them soul winning, holidays, soul winning. And sometimes, we can go, we think we can go out, and then we can go to a certain area, and then we don't prepare for ourselves, and we think we can just go out there and preach the gospel. Now, I'm not saying this as your experience. This is my realization. But at the same time, I would agree to what Pastor said about this language barrier. So we as being humans, we can be still invincibles, and we can be hindered with this factor. Okay, so winning is a skill. This is not a talent. Okay, so we didn't get saved and then immediately pick up our Bibles and then just go out and do soul winning. It didn't happen like that. So still, we have to practice. You have to learn from others. We even have to start as silent partners so that we can learn how to properly preach the gospel, right? So same as in what our experience. So we have to practice soul winning. And I myself, showing up in Cebu, it's like I'm confident, like I can show up here and just do what I want, or do what I used to do in Manila. But that's not the case for me as well. So a little bit background, okay? So I'm from the Western Visayas. So I'm not from Central Visayas. I'm not a native of Cebu. But we share common language. We have a different language in the Western Visayas. It's called Hiligaynon. In Central Visayas, they speak Cebuano, basically, but we still consider this Bisaya. And then the eastern part, they speak Waray, and part of that is Cebuana as well in Southern Leyte. Okay, so I think I can just preach in Tagalog and, don't prepare a gospel presentation in Cebuano and just tell them, yeah, I can speak Cebuano, I can understand Cebuano, and you can just answer me in Cebuano, but I'll just talk to you in Tagalog, okay? So that's the technique that I did. And it worked. So you know what I learned during the second day of our mission trip? So basically, we did the first day in Faith and Verity in Mandawi, right? But the first guy I talked to during that day in the afternoon of soul winning, he's really fluent in Tagalog. But I later learned after the conversation that his father is Tagalog, so he has no problem speaking Tagalog. And then the first day on Monday, right? So we did the houses, because there's not that much people in the park. So our group was forced to move in Santo Niño near the port area in Cebu. So we did the houses, and what you realize is that, if we bombard people with Tagalog right away, they kind of shy away with the conversation. And then, so that's what I realized. So what I did is, like what Pastor mentioned, you have to learn like a simple greeting in Cebuano, right? So you have to greet in Cebuano, and then I have to tell them, hey, look, I can speak in Cebuano, I can understand Cebuano, so you can answer me in Cebuano. so that we can just have a good conversation. And I presented like to a 13-year-old boy, and then he would just default in Cebuano every time. Cebuano, Cebuano, Cebuano. And that's an advantage to me because I know the language. But you know what? If you go to these houses, like comparable areas, for example, if you ever went to Rosario, these alleys in Rosario, a single alley, single exit, and single entrance, and then in the dark places of, we've never been there for the recent years, in Santolan, if you ever experienced that, these slum areas, and if you talk to these people, they're really into speaking their own native language. They understand Tagalog, basically, but then again, they would just default in Bisaya, and then if you ever run into demographics like 14-year-olds and below, that's the case. And then if 30-year-olds and above, and that's the case as well. Not all, but basically, generally, that's the experience. So for us to be effective, and I'm not saying that you have to learn the language, basically, because Tagalog and English, that was enough for us to go so winning in the parks. But for me, as an individual, this is what I realized in myself, that I just don't, I should have learned much better, or I should have practiced, or should have presented myself with a better Cebuano presentation so that I won't be doubling the effort, or I won't be doubling the time of my soul-winning presentation. Turn to Ecclesiastes 9. Ecclesiastes 9. I myself didn't realize that I had this problem way back before we ever went to Cebu. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm from the Western Visayas, so we have a different language as well. So I actually kind of ran into this problem when I was at home, because I was presenting the gospel, and you go to these mountainous areas, they don't understand Tagalog, they don't understand English as well. So I'm trying to present the gospel, and I realized that somebody who is used to live in Manila speaking in Tagalog, I can't just pick up my mother tongue and preach the gospel right away in my mother tongue. You can't just do that, because number one, you have to practice it in your mother tongue as well. So that's the problem, and I overcome the problem years ago, and then going to Cebu, I was too confident. I didn't realize that, I still have to make my own presentation in Cebuano. Okay, you are there in Ecclesiastes 9. Ecclesiastes 9 in verse 10. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest. So what's the big deal? Because some of you guys don't speak Cebuano, but still you were able to got somebody saved, right? So no problem. But for me, like, whatsoever your hand findeth to do, do it with your might. Especially for us, we should have done better, right? I want to be effective. Okay? And I also believe in what I do, okay? I'm not just there in Cebu, pick up my Bible, talking to somebody. I know that the gospel has power, and it has the power to get somebody saved, okay? So when we were in Bohol, so we were traveling around, right? Turn to Esther chapter number 4. Esther chapter number 4. So this is one of the biggest experiences where I can say that I have this regret in myself, because when we traveled to Bohol, we went soul winning to Tagbilaran City, okay? That's the biggest city, that's the capital of the Bohol Island. And we kind of do a soul winning in the park, and it was late, and I ran into these two guys, okay? So they're waiting for somebody, and they agreed to me that we can talk, but when that guy who is fetching them is going to arrive, then they're going to leave. Okay, so I take that time. So one of them obviously cannot understand Tagalog. He doesn't understand English. And you can see it when you converse, like there's a big question mark inside his head. He doesn't really understand Tagalog. But his friend, he can understand Tagalog. So what we do is like you always go to the path of least resistance. I presented the gospel in Tagalog anyway. And 10 minutes into the conversation, I feel bad for the guy, okay? Because I can see that he's so attentive because his friend is responding to me in Bisaya. And when he's responding to me in Bisaya, he kind of pick up a bit of the conversation since I'm answering in Tagalog. And then I do my best to answer in Cebuano as well. But we're tired, okay? If we're traveling, we traveled that morning from Cebu, and then we just enjoy the view, and then we end up in Tagbilaran. So I realized, because he was listening, so I feel bad for him. So that thing popped up in my head. So what if I would just present this in Cebuano anyway, since the guy is, he's listening. So, so I resumed my gospel presentation, 10 minutes in the conversation, and started from Cebuano. So it's kind of hard, as I mentioned earlier, because I didn't prepare for this. I don't have a gospel presentation in Cebuano prepared, so I'm picking up the vocabularies, explaining. So it takes a little bit of time. And then one of the problems I run into is that I don't have a Bible in Bisaya. I don't have a Bible in Bisaya, because my Bible that I'm using is our standard English Tagalog. So I'm going to read to him in Tagalog, but then again, since the problem is he don't understand Tagalog, I'm translating into Bisaya, so it doubles the effort. That's why it takes a lot of time. And then I'm picking up my pace, trying to explain, and then we're in the eternal security. And then the guy showed up, and he said, no, we can't really extend right now because we are far from here. We don't really live in Tagbilaran, so they left. And then, you always have that feeling, right, in soul winning, that, sorry feeling, like you feel bad to yourself since you could have done. Because you know what, the 10-minute interval, if I could just have started in Cebuana, maybe I could have finished that eternal security, right? And time is important. And, I feel bad for myself because, I could have done much better. I could have bought a Bisaya, because, in Faith and Verity, they have Bisaya. We have the invites that we are giving, right? They have that Bisaya verses in there, but that's from Tagalog. From the Cebu, from the Bible itself. So you can't just use that as a guide, or else you would build upon a soul-winning presentation based on that guide. That's what we do here in Manila. Okay, so you are there in Esther chapter number 4, and, I could have just have looked for another conversation, but you feel sorry and you feel bad. I was just sitting on the bench in Plaza Rizal in Tagbilaran, and I could only think of this verse, Esther chapter number 4, Esther 4, verse number 14, Esther 4:14, where if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but thou at thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So, you can put the word in that, in the latter part of the verse. And who knoweth whether thou art come to Bohol for such a time as this, since you can actually speak Bisaya. You could have got him saved if you just prepared. Turn to Mark 16. Mark 16. The reality is this, as I mentioned earlier, you can just do soul winning, even if that's your mother tongue, in another language, if you don't have good practice to it, okay? When we went to Bacolod, we presented the gospel in Hiligaynon as well. So we don't have any problems, since I have already presenting this if I visit places like Iloilo or in my hometown in Capiz. So I don't have really struggle. I can present it the same effective way and the same amount of time in Tagalog. This is not only limited to us, because the guys who used to present the gospel in Bisaya, they would struggle with this as well when they show up here in Manila. I remember in our last mission trip before that, during COVID, the guys in Davao would usually ask me, hey, how do I word this in Tagalog? How do I actually present it in Tagalog? And some of them, they would just present the gospel in English, in plain English, since they used to preach in English. So we just present this in English. Mark 16, verse 17, and this sign shall follow them that believe. In my name shall they cast out devils, they shall speak with new tongues. Well, this is speaking of the day of Pentecost, but this can also apply to us who are soul winners. We will be speaking in new tongues, because you know what? We're going to be reaching new areas, not only limited here in Metro Manila. We're going to spread out through the whole archipelago. And again, if you go there, it's more effective. You speak you can actually speak in that native language. I mean, one of the things that actually, inspires me is that when in Faith and Verity, the guy Sam Kirkab, I think, he speaks fluent Bisaya. I mean, you can be blown with his speaking. I mean, perfect Bisaya. I mean, he's American, but he speaks perfect Bisaya because he's living in Bohol. And you can really, you sometimes don't really realize that, but I kind of pick up Bisaya as a kid. And when I speak Bisaya, I'm actually referring to as Cebuano. Because even though we're Bisaya, we don't really categorize, or we don't really call ourselves Bisaya, because we speak a little bit different language. So I learned Bisaya as a kid, and then, because Cebuanos, they fly around all that area. Everywhere, fishing grounds, Cebuano, Cebuano, Cebuano. And then you kind of pick up their language, because when they hop to the next island, they don't actually speak the language of that island. They still speak their own language. So kind of conversing with them, you pick up the language. And I also lived in Cebu after college. So that's where I really want to find a work, because it's like an overnight drive from our hometown. And I kind of love the place. I don't really feel like a stranger in Cebu. When we showed up there, it's like home. It's like Metro Manila, but then you just hear this language that you don't understand. So it's like Manila people speaking in Bisaya, and that's the same area. So almost Metro Manila. The just difference is that, the air quality is different. And, maybe you can say about the traffic. So it's like a little bit different. It's not only limited in Cebuano, by the way. So I kind of pick up Bisaya, and then I graduated. I stayed in Cebu so that I can take my license in mechanical engineering. I applied for jobs. You remember I posted about what's my first interview in that hotel, pretty fancy hotel. So I end up in Manila because I can't really find a job who would hire me in Cebu. So in Manila, I pick up another language, so I learned Japanese. So I kind of throw away Bisaya, because I can say, you say this, I can speak Bisaya, I can converse Bisaya. There's no really other reasons like to really learn deep Bisaya. Because that time I wasn't saved. So I don't really have that thinking that if I learn a new language, then that's advantage, because if I learn that language, I can present the gospel in that language. So I kind of throw that away, so I focus in Japanese. And you know what though, if you ask me today to present the gospel in Japanese, yes, I can present the gospel in Japanese, but you know what though? It would take me also time. It will take me effort. Why? I don't use Japanese as a medium of presenting the gospel on a regular basis, just like in Tagalog. So what remind me is that this is not only limited to Cebuanos. There's that guy in the archipelago somewhere here in the Philippines who does not understand English, who does not understand Tagalog. And you know what? For you guys here, if you're not born in Metro Manila, you're speaking a different language. Maybe 3. In minimum, you speak 3 languages. Okay? So that's the language, that's your mother tongue in your province. For example, in the north, you guys are big in Ilocano, because that's the regional language of the north. And then Kapampangan in the central Luzon. Southern part, Bisaya is the next big language. So that's why I realized that even though that's the most stranging language you can ever hear, or maybe you don't think that matters, but you know what though? One of these times, you will be out there in your hometown. You will be out there somewhere doing vacations. And you know what? As a member of Verity Baptist Church, what do you do in your free time? What do you do? Soul winning. You go out soul winning. And what? And that time, when you encounter that person, you realize how handy it will be if you can present the gospel in your native languages. Okay? So don't take that for granted. Okay? Turn to Ephesians 6. Okay? Ephesians 6. So not only we are not invincible, sorry. We're not invincibles with regards to soul winning. How about our health? We're not also invincibles for our health. For us who work in the labor force, we always have that saying, bawal magkasakit, okay? You can't just get sick. Because you have to remind somebody, hey, you have bills to pay, you have a job, you just can't miss it. And this kind of reminder, we always use this to remind ourselves of our secular jobs, but we don't actually use it in our spiritual job as well. We don't remind ourselves na bawal magkasakit kasi we have soul winning marathon bukas or we have a mission trip that is coming. We don't use that to remind ourselves. And this is one of the realizations as well, because what is the reason why people miss soul winning? What's the reason why people miss soul winning? Some of you might think, yeah, they're backslidden. Yeah, I know, that's one of the reasons you can miss soul winning. But you know what though? The main reason is that they're sick. That's why we got used to seeing everybody during soul winning marathons, and then when somebody's missing, oh, nasaan si ganito? And then we can assume, maybe may sakit siguro or what, right? We don't assume that they're backslidden. We assume that they're sick. And that's one of the reasons as well. Because you know what? If you're depressed, guess what? You're still out there doing soul winning, right? If you're tired from your work, you still, just one conversation. I just want to present the gospel. But if you're sick, what happens? You're down, you don't have focus, so you don't do soul winning. So that's one of the reasons why people miss soul winning. I also, myself, is kind of guilty of this, of, I just don't want to get sick because I have a job to do, because I don't want to miss work, stuff like that. And this is one of the realizations I had in Cebu, because I don't know why, but I have a sensitive throat, so that's one of my problems. I usually lose my voice, and you guys have seen me lose my voice, right? And it's awful. Okay. During the soul winning marathons, after the soul winning marathons, everybody's tired, so somebody might give you a cold drink, water, or somebody cola or pop, stuff like that. Sometimes I know this is rude, but maybe you have experience with me turning it down. I don't want to take it, or maybe I took it and then you realize I gave it to somebody else, right? Maybe what's wrong with me? Why he gave it away? But actually, I just don't want. Sometimes when somebody offers me a drink, right? I have this Outlook calendar popping up inside my head, reminding me, hey, meron kang meeting tomorrow. And I do interpretation sometimes, and if I don't have my voice, guess what? I'm useless because I can't speak. And that's what I realize, is that I have to take care with my voice as well. And every time gives me some water. Yes, sometimes I do take it, and you see me downing a bottle of pop. But I don't have any meetings going the next day, so I can really just take chances. Ephesians 6:9. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 19. And for me, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in bonds, that therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. So utterance is important. I know this is the utterance for the Holy Ghost, but you know what? Physical utterance is important as well for us to relay the message of salvation. Turn to Ecclesiastes 7. Ecclesiastes 7. So in Cebu, it's their 6th anniversary, Faith and Verity. So they had a feast during the anniversary. Lechon manok, lechon baboy, which is the most important anyway if you visit Cebu. Pop, and they have dirty ice cream. Okay, and I love dirty ice cream. I always look forward going home because that's my favorite, dirty ice cream. And I can say that the dirty ice cream in our town tastes better than the dirty ice cream in Manila. So at first, I'm reminded of this, and I didn't take the pop, and I just took the dirty ice cream. And then after soul winning that afternoon, so everybody started, because we walk a lot during the afternoon to just find somebody who can talk to us. And then I realized a little bit thirsty, so I take the pop. And then I feel that after drinking it, it's a little bit scratch in my throat, but I just rinse it with a cup of water. But then during that night, so we can hang around, so we visit VGC. There's not the literal BGC, but that's the equivalent of BGC in Cebu. So apparently there's Ayala IT Park in Cebu. It looks like BGC. So we're hanging around, we went to Ayala Mall, these Manileños going to Ayala Mall in Cebu, stuff like that. And then I think we downed like cocoa milk tea, like the medium size, like 500 ml. I'm not still really reminded of this, so we took that. And then in the morning, I can really feel that discomfort in my throat. So my throat is itchy now. And that's just Mondays. We're just starting off. And you know what? I feel disappointed actually during that morning. Because when I feel that discomfort, I know that's going to lead to voice loss for me as an experience. Okay? So, look, we paid a lot for that trip. I don't know about you. Maybe we paid a lot, but on average, we spent like 18,000 per head for that trip. We didn't stay in Cebu because we're hopping in these islands, taking accommodation, so maybe we spent much. 18,000 it's a huge amount of money to be just stuck in Cebu without a voice, right? And that's so winning. I don't care about Cebu. I've been there in Cebu. I don't care about the chocolate hills, the beach in Panglao, and not necessarily I don't care about the tarsiers. I was there because I signed up for the So Winning mission trip. It's disappointing. And during these times, if you feel that discomfort, the good remedy for that is you have a good rest, right? You have a good rest. Have a good sleep. But then again, we're always on travel, so we can't just have a good sleep. And that night, we're traveling to Bacolod. So it's disappointing to you. Thank God, we found salt in Bacolod. So saltwater gargle actually fixed it. So I didn't actually lose my voice through the whole week, and I was able to preach the gospel. That you know what? Sometimes we can drug ourselves, not only that food or stuff outside like rain. Sometimes we can also drug ourselves. Overwork in soul winning. You don't have to turn there, but in Ecclesiastes 7, verse 16, be not righteous overmuch, neither make thyself overwise. Why shouldest thou destroy thyself? We can also drag ourselves doing so much soul winning and not think about, look, there's a week of soul winning. This is just the day one. Okay? You can overdrag yourself, stuff like that, and get sick. Right? Turn to Joshua 1. Joshua 1. Not only we are not invincible in soul winning in our health, we are also not invincible with our routines. Routines, okay? So what are routines? Well, I'm talking about your personal walk with God, okay? Bible reading, Bible memorization, prayer time. Because it is easier to, we're in Cebu, we're in mission trip, but sometimes you still have that mentality in your head. You think in your head like, yeah, we're also here to enjoy the vacation, right? So you're kind of looking forward. You gotta get excited about the places you're gonna visit, and also you kind of hung up with that excitement of we're giving a gospel to a different ethnicity. These are the Bisaya, okay? And also you're looking forward. Hey, we're gonna visit Panglao, we're gonna visit the chocolate hills. We can see the tarsiers. They're pretty small, marsupials, and you can be distracted of these things. And you know what? Our daily Bible reading, that mission trip lasted for a week. And you might think like, is it okay? It's just okay. It's just a week. But you know what? Though missing a single day in your routine, in your Bible reading, is hard. It's hard to go back second day. Because you know what? If you miss that chart, then you have to make amends, right? Well, if you don't want to make amends, then you have to adjust the schedule. And your Bible reading, whatever that would be, New Testament or Old Testament, is going to be longer than as scheduled. So, it is easier to lose track of your Bible reading as well. Because during that times, if you have your family with you, then you don't have problems. Somebody has to remind you. But if you're not with your family, so who's going to remind you? And that's why it's pretty important. You're there in Joshua chapter 1, in verse number 8. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and thou shalt have good success. It doesn't mention here that it can depart out of your mouth if you're in a mission trip, okay? And in this case, it's easier to justify, right? We're soul winning for the whole week. So maybe it's just okay for me to lose track of that. The reality is 1 week is a longer span for you to lose that. It's going to be hard for you to go back. Turn to Daniel 6. Daniel 6. So that's not a justification, okay, to miss your routines. Daniel 6, verse number 10. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open, in his chambers toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. So Daniel is not putting up a show here. Just, hey, I'm going to pray, I'm going to show these guys, and I'm going to pray. No, that's his prayer time. So as he did aforetime. So Daniel, we can see here that even though the signing was, the law that was signed by Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel was not distracted. And for us, it's easy to get distracted. So in this case, I have to make amends. And also I have to change schedules as well. So in my case, since we're always on the move, I know this is not your conventional Bible reading, but I kind of take advantage of the travel time. We're sitting on the bus like 3 hours, sitting in a ferry 3 hours, in Bohol 2 hours, back and forth in Fastcraft. So I can take advantage of that. So it is an advantage for us to have the Bible on our smartphone as well. Because if you're bus and traveling overnight, it's dark. But it's since it is in a screen, we can still do our Bible reading. And we're all in that situation basically when we have to make amends with our Bible reading because we missed it. And when we're out in the public and you don't want everybody to know that you're reading your Bible, so what do? You pick up your smartphone and just do your Bible reading. So it is important that we have our Bibles in our smartphone. I know everybody has Bibles in their smartphone, but you just don't use it to reference or, to look for verses, stuff like that when you forget something. It is also important. And, I was reminded of that, you can zoom in because, if you can't really see the letters in your Bible and you find it hard reading your Bibles, then you can actually zoom in your smartphone. And that's an advantage because, we pay so much money to buy a smartphone, but then we don't take it to our own advantage. And it becomes like a disadvantage to us since it hinders us. So we should take a smartphone and use it for our own advantage in our Christian life. Turn to 1 Timothy 6. 1 Timothy 6. So point number 1, we are not invincible. One of the realizations I had is trade-offs are inevitable. Trade-offs are inevitable. So as we're traveling from Cebu to Bohol, we did a morning travel. So I kind of planned our itineraries like we're traveling in the evening but I realized that's not feasible since everybody's getting sick. When we showed up in the midweek service, you realize we're sick. So I kind of noticed that the guys with me are getting sick as well. So I decided that we extend our stay in Cebu for another 6 hours so that we can have much sleep. And we just travel in the morning. And that's a good experience as well, traveling to Bohol in the mornings. You can see the islands actually. Not just the island of Bohol, but there's small islands, inhabited islands. And as we pass by these small inhabited islands, Shanna and I were talking about how beautiful those islands, white beach, coconuts, stuff like that, pretty tropical. And he said, it must be a good place to live. And I would agree with that. But then I told him, living in an island is hard. I don't know if there's some islander here or you guys live in the mainland, but living in the island is hard. We have that saying in Tagalog, mahirap mabuhay sa isla. It's hard to live in the island because, your resources are limited, right? Yes, white beach, coconuts, sunsets and sunrise, fresh air, but you know what? The food supply is limited. I remember when I was child, the islanders would, because we live in the main islands, the islanders would just show up. They would trade to us, this high value seafood like lobsters, groupers, stuff like that. And then we just show up, and it was, they would just exchange it for water, gasoline, diesel, kerosene, and that's what we want. And then betchin, because you don't have betchin in the islands, so these necessities, they would just trade these high-value produce from the ocean just for their necessities. And also, limited electricity. right? We have the convenience of putting a plug in the outlet and just don't mind that we're gonna pay this because, convenience is here. But you know what? You just don't have that luxury in the islands as well. Not only that, how about signals, right? Signal. Some of these islands, they don't have signals. And, you guys from mountain areas, you remember like in those days, we don't have signals. And there's only one spot in that barangay where they have signals and there's a tree in there. And when you show up, all smartphones, all cell phones are hanging in that tree. And then people would just show up, check if there's a message, and if there's no message, you would just go back. So that's the kind of convenience that we kind of give away if we're living in the city. But then again, we have this convenience, we can connect to the internet, we have Wi-Fi's, but still, we don't actually use our smartphones to the benefit of us. We use our smartphones to hinder us, especially I'm speaking about a spiritual life. We don't use our smartphones to be better as Christians, okay? We use our smartphones for us to be hindered. So that's one we can see in these islands. 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy 6, verse number 6, but godliness with content is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, but it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. Look, until we have like-minded churches in every province of this country, trade-offs will always exist. And I just realized, even though we eventually, technically speaking, theoretically, we can set up a church in every province of this country, guess what? Trade-offs, they will not go away. Because number one, opportunities are limited. Opportunities are limited. Now, we can complain, turn to Mark 10. Mark 10. We can complain about how hard life here in Metro Manila. The recent flood, that's worse than 2020 flooding because it's a little bit higher, okay? It's like centimeters higher. But you know what though? Flood exists also in the provinces. Okay, so you just have to choose where your best trade-offs are. The guy who drove us in Bohol, he actually lived here in Metro Manila. So he told us he used to be a delivery driver in Commonwealth Market, and then for 7 years here in the Metro, and then moved back to Bohol. The last biggest typhoon that passed the Bohol Island was, I think, Odette. As I can remember, the typhoon Odette, his house was washed away by the flooding in Lubbock River. So he said he didn't have anything saved because the whole house was carried by the flood. So imagine that. So not only flooding, but you can think about how bad the traffic congestion here in the metro, right, in Manila. But the problem in the province is opposite. You have to wait for hours. You have to wait for hours for that bus to show up. Right, when we were in Bohol, I was expecting in Cebu, no problem. Every jeep is plying. But then when we were in Bohol, the interval was 45 minutes before the next seres could show up. We got stranded in terminal. That's the longest time we have to wait in the terminal, 40 minutes from Tubigon so that we can move to Carmen because there's no passengers. So they're waiting to act in the province how it works. The bus is there. There's no predetermined time when the bus is going to leave because they have to wait for the bus to be filled before they can leave. And we're waiting 40 minutes before the bus can leave. And eventually it left. But you know what? That 40 minutes is a big downtime as well. So you can imagine that. You can have a downtime here in the metro because you're in traffic. But then again, you can also have a downtime in the provinces as well. What about salaries and opportunities? Now, this is the big thing why people move from the provinces here in the metro. Because we can complain about how bad Metro Manila is, but you know what though? The one thing we can't deny is that opportunities are here in the metro. We have a higher salary here. We can remember, I can remember the guy who drove us Pampanglao to Tagbilaran. We were going back to Cebu now, okay? So the guy who drove us, so he kind of talked, we're talking to these drivers, and the guy talked to us. He's really good in Tagalog, so he can explain everything about the condition of Bohol. He said, this is extension of Cebu. It's like an extension of Cebu because the regional office is in Cebu. So the people in Bohol have to travel to Cebu to secure documents. Same as the guys from, Negros Oriental. Is this a part of Region 7? So you have to travel to Cebu. And then he said that the Bohol Island is really much dependent on Cebu. They speak the same language, but then there's a little bit of an accent to the Boholano. And then he said everything is expensive in Cebu. They don't have factories, so they have to rely on supplies from... everything is expensive in Bohol, okay? So they have to rely, because there's no factories, they have to rely on stuff flying from Cebu to Bohol. That's why the transportation is really established. 2 hours from Cebu. Fast crab, this landing crabs is available. So he kind of tell us everything is expensive here, but you know what? There's one thing that is cheap. And we're expecting like that's a positive thing. And he said, you know what? The thing that's only cheap in Bohol, he said, salary. So the labor cost in Bohol is cheaper, he said. That's why they are so dependent in the tourism industry. And at that point, I kind of realized, we can see these tariffs in there written behind the driver. It costs you thousands from from another municipality to transfer to another municipality, because that's the only thing people can find there to be a source of income is tourism. It takes you thousands. That's why these people who drive us, they can't really, can rip us off since we can also we can actually speak the language. They gave us tips, Yes, he said, I can't just drive you over there because, it would cost you thousands. So I can just drop you here, wait for a bus, and then eventually you can move to the next city. And you know what? One of the things I realized is that we are really blessed here in the metro. You just don't realize it if you don't move out from your comfort zone. You can complain about, this time we're not packed today because, pastors in Cavite, some families also joined in Cavite. But on our regular days, you realize we are packed here in our current church, right? You can complain about, how uncomfortable you are, how packed we are, you don't have space for fellowship. But you know what though, you realize you are here today in church, sitting comfortably in a chair and in an air-conditioned room. And that's a blessing. You know what? This is not a guarantee if you join an IFB church. Comfortable chairs and air-conditioned rooms, some churches don't have this. And you're there in Mark 10. That's not a guarantee. And this is the thing that God guaranteed us if we join, if we live our lives for Him. Mark 10, verse 29. And Jesus answered and said, Verily I say unto you, there is no man that hath left house, or brethren, or sisters, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or lands, for my sake and the gospel's, but he shall receive 100-fold now in this time, houses, and brethren, and sisters, and mothers, and children, and lands, with persecutions, and in the world to come, eternal life. So you know what? What's guaranteed? Yes, they're going to give us all this, houses, brethren, sisters, mothers, children, and lands. But you know what though? What's guaranteed? We're going to have persecutions. Okay? So He didn't guarantee that we're going to have comfort. Okay? And, we're moving to our new building since we're kind of outgrow this building now in a couple of months. And you know what? There are going to be another set of complaints of what's missing in that building once we move there. That's a guarantee. But you know what though? But as long as we can hold church services and it's functional, that's our new building, right? You can't just complain about that. Remember, we have fans, okay? We have air conditioners, we have fridge, microwaves. That's not a guarantee. If you join a church, you're going to have a microwave or a rice cooker standby. Okay, so you have to be really appreciative of this. You know what? The church, it did its best, okay, to make us comfortable for our church services, right? To make us feel at home. But you know what though? I have to remind you guys, this is not your home. This is God's house, okay? You don't have to turn there, but in 1 Timothy chapter number 3, it says that thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and the ground of truth. This is the house of God. So we have to treat this place as if we showed here this morning and we are meeting with God. And indeed, God is with us, because for there are two or three gathered together in His name, God is in the midst of them. That's why we have to behave ourselves. We have to treat this place as if this is the house of God. And indeed, this is the house of God. You know what? These small things like, cleaning, picking up the trash after the church service, there's small things. But again, these are helpful things to consider if you are in a church. Because when we showed up this morning, the place is pretty organized, right? The chairs, the songbooks, they are laid together. And then when we showed up, we just, disorganize the chairs. And there's no problem with that because we're holding church service. But you have to think about that. We have to at least clean our place before we leave. And, you might be thinking like, we have workers in the church. But let me remind you, they are not your servants though. They are hired to help the pastor do the duties or ministration in the church for the daily. Right? So you have to really consider this stuff. I mean, sometimes we're so blessed, like, we can just take for granted this stuff that we have, and we realize that we're out of these, they're really out of bounds in these. We return to John chapter 4. John chapter 4. The church does what they can, okay? It's the leadership that makes decisions of what the priorities are. So we just leave them to the church, but I tell you that one of the things you must realize is that with regards to these trade-offs, is we are really blessed to have a church like this and to be in a church like this in Verity, especially with these conditions. The only thing that we're missing, like, the beaches, isn't it? It takes a long time to travel to these beaches and these beautiful places. But again, the people, the convenience, salary, and also the population. Because we are in the midst of a 62 million population here in the Luzon Island. And in Metro Manila alone, it's 14 million people. So we have the convenience as well with regards to soul winning, because we don't need to travel for longer distances. When we were in Bohol, we were like traveling from the port to Tagbilaran, and we just passed by these streets where there's no incoming traffic. It's just ours that's passing the streets. You can rarely see houses. You can see these chocolate hills, but there's not that much houses. But then when you go to these municipalities and cities, then the population starts to have a bigger density population. But with regards to the small towns, there's not much people. And I was thinking, if we are so winning here in this area, we need to have a motorcycle. Because you can just walk from house to house, like kilometers away. The next house will be kilometers away beside the road. So you should have a motorcycle or at least a bicycle for you to be able to save time during your soul winning time. So I got reminded of this, that we're pretty blessed here in Verity. So not only we are not invincible or unbeatable, and trade-offs are inevitable. Lastly, I realized that there are still a lot to induce. So I kind of like to make this alliterated. So induce means, remind about induction, right? Induction motors, work. There's still a lot to work, okay? John chapter 4, verse 35. Say not ye that there are yet 4 months, then cometh harvest? Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look in the fields, for they are white already to harvest. So turn to Matthew chapter 9, Matthew 9. When we were traveling to Bacolod from Cebu, so it was about 8 hours overnight, okay? And I was awake the whole time during that travel. So remember, during that, the morning, I have a discomfort in my throat, and I want to have a good rest, but then again, we're traveling, and then you can't really fall asleep in the travel. Because what happened is we are planning to cross the island from another location. We plan to cross that from Toledo to San Carlos, but then again, we found out that we're going to have a much longer downtime if we use that route. So we end up looking for another route, and we have this route. It is a more longer travel time, but we're going to show up in Bacolod 5 a.m. In contrast to that shorter traveling time, but we're going to show up to Bacolod at 11 a.m., which eventually going to take us about 6 hours, which is a little bit a big downtime when regards if you're considering, roaming around and doing soul winning. So we end up taking that route, but then we don't have reserved seats. So we have to rely on the open seats. So we're scattered in the bus, and I wasn't able to find a seat open. So there's only one seat available in front of the bus, and that's where the conductor sits, beside the driver. So they offered me the seat, and the conductor stood for the rest of the travel. So I was there in front of the bus, sitting beside the driver. And, that's night, and you can just fall asleep if you're traveling in a bus and in your front seat. If you know these things, you just can't fall asleep, because you know what? Accidents happen during night most of the time. And I can't really fall asleep because we're riding a Ceres bus. If you guys from the Visayas, if you know this bus, they are notorious for accidents. The biggest accident they had was in December 4th last year. The bus jumped off the cliff like 100 feet, killing some 19 passengers. So that's fresh in my mind, because I was reminded, because that's in my province. So no, you can just fall asleep in this travel. And during our transit, that was the northern parts of the mountains in Cebu, so it's very curvy. But the thing is that we don't have incoming traffic as well, so you don't really have problems like you're in a curve and then somebody is incoming. But then, when we jump off the ferry and then we're now in the Negros Island, so I think we started from Escalante City, and then we're traveling to these cities, Sagay, Silay, Cadiz, Talisay, and then eventually to Bacolod. We can see these huge parks in these cities, because these are cities as well, not highly urbanized, but as these Category 9 cities. And then you can see these parks because they're lit in the evening. And you can imagine always, because we're from Verity, we associate parks with soul winning, and you can imagine to yourself, man, what a good experience to do soul winning in these areas as well. You can ask yourself, who's reaching these areas? Because I personally know guys from Iloilo, like they're listening to the new IFB, they do soul winning as well in that island, the island next to Negros Island, Panay Island. And then in Cebu, we got Verity, Faith and Verity. And in Bohol, we got guys there. Brother Rizal used to be in Bohol as well. So who's reaching these islands? And again, you can think to yourself, same as when we are traveling to Bohol. We're planning to do this soul winning in next to the Lubok River. That's where you can see these river cruises, where they basically ride these cruise, and then you enjoy dinner or lunch and food, stuff like that. And these islands are used. These are the major islands of the Visayas. So Matthew 9. And by the way, that's not a travel like we used to travel, like North EDSA to Pasay. That's a travel because we used to travel like 300 kilometers, 200 kilometers. That's a long travel. Matthew 9, verse 35. Matthew 9:35. And Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Then said he unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray therefore the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers in his harvest. Like the harvest in these regions, by the way, Visayas is made of 3 major regions, like Region 6, Western Visayas, Region 7, Central Visayas, and Region 8, Eastern Visayas. And eventually, the end of this year, there's going to be a new region as well to be added, the Visayas, because the unification of the Negros Island has already been signed. So basically, you guys from Dumaguete, you don't have to go to Cebu anymore, because you're not a part of the Central Visayas. And then the guys from Bacolod, you don't have to go to Iloilo anymore because you're not a part of Western Visayas. The Negros Island region is their new region. Okay, so pray for God to provide laborers in the Visayas also. Because one thing is that no soul winners is showing in that area. one of the main reasons is nobody's praying for that area for God to provide laborers. And for us, we should be reminded of these things that, God should provide laborers in this area. Yeah, the Visayas alone, as for the 2020 statistics, I think this is outdated, but I know it has grown since, but the Visayas alone in that region has 20 million inhabitants to the whole island. These three regions, okay? So let's go to these demographics. So we can have this overview. Panay Island, which is in the Western Visayas, 4.5 million. The Negros Island, 4.7. Cebu Island, 3.3 million. And Cebu is the smallest island in the Visayan Island cluster, making it the most highly densely populated province and island as well. Second most. Bohol Island, a little bit lower with 1.4 million inhabitants. Eastern Visayas, which comprise of Samar and Leyte, they have 4.5 million, but then they have a bigger area, making it the least populated islands of the Visayas. Look, 20.6 million. We don't really see these numbers, right? Since we are, we focus here in the metro. But then, these are quite huge numbers. And I don't say, like, you go to the Visayas, forget the Visayan save, because you know what? Visaya are here also in the Metro Manila, right? They show up here for opportunities. What I was trying to say is that we pray for God that He provide laborers in this to do the harvest in these areas as well. We only know like one like-minded churches catering to this, and this is in an island of 3.3 million inhabitants, Faith and Verity. But what about all these major islands as well in the Visayas? Turn to Acts 28. Acts 28. We are not invincibles, okay? So we have to take note of that. Trade-offs are inevitable, so you just have to look. And you have to decide to what trade-offs you want to give up. Quality of life or opportunities. And there are still a lot to induce. It means there are still a lot to work. Acts 28, verse 11. And after 3 months, we departed in a ship of Alexandria, which had wintered in the isle, whose sign was Castor and Pollux. And landing at Syracuse, we tarried there 3 days. And from thence we pitched a compass and came to Rhegium. And after 1 day, the south wind blew, and we came the next day to Puteoli, where we found brethren and were desired to tarry with them 7 days. And so went we toward Rome. This is the story of Paul. Apostle Paul traveled a lot in the Mediterranean, okay? Because that's where his area is, his missionary journeys. And I'm sure he also visited a lot of beautiful places in the Mediterranean. I mean, he got stranded. Apostle Paul, in this verse, in Acts 28, he got stranded for 3 months in the island of Malta. Okay, that's one of the top tourist destinations in the Mediterranean. But you know what, though, in his epistles, we can find evidence of him talking about how beautiful Malta was, or Melita in our King James Bible. The only thing he mentioned about is, his missionary journeys, how he got persecuted, who's with him, and the work that he had done for Christ. He didn't mention about this beautiful place. 2 weeks ago, and I knew about this, is that Pastor announced the schedule for the Bicol's mission trip. February 24th to March 2nd, 2025. So basically, that's the day after the Manila mission trip concludes. And some of you are already looking forward to this. Maybe some of you have already booked your flights and, booked your accommodations. We still have about over 6 months to prepare for this. And I know, traveling takes a lot of resources. I mentioned the figures earlier, that's a lot of money, right? We have 6 months. But you know what? If you can only afford to do one travel, as a single guy, single lady, or with a family, I encourage you to join this soul-winning mission trip, right? Where you can actually enjoy the places. Look, the Chocolate Hills, they're beautiful. Okay, but you can just stand there for hours staring at the Chocolate Hills. Okay, one good thing is like you can actually enjoy the Chocolate Hills is while you're traveling, you can see them moving. Well, actually, you're moving. You can see them moving because once you're near the top of that Chocolate Hill, like 200 steps, and you can see all these chocolate hills scattered. They're not actually in the same area. You can see like in the pictures, like you thought like they're in the same area. They're not in the same area. They're scattered in the island of Bohol. But since you're in the top of the chocolate hill, you kind of perceive like they're kind of grouped since they're next to each other, but they're not. So traveling within Bohol and seeing those chocolate hills, that's enjoyable. The beach is comparable to Boracay. It's on par with Boracay. But then again, my memories with that mission trip is not about those. They're in my phone, they're in the photo, so I can scroll and look for those memories. But one thing that it keeps me, or it boggles me, is that thing that I missed, the opportunity of getting somebody saved because I don't prepared my presentation in Cebuana. So that's the memory. And not only that, the memories of the people I got saved in those places as well. That's the one thing that stays in me. So those traveling in those areas, yeah, they're beautiful. You can romanticize about that. But for us who are soul winners, and you know to that to yourself, you want to serve the Lord, one thing that's most fulfilling is, right, those things that would stay in your memory is that, you can have a map inside your house, and you can put a pin on it and say, I was there 2024, I was there in 2025. You can put a pen on it. I was there, not for traveling, not for seeing these beautiful places. I was there, I went soul winning, and I get somebody saved. And I think that's the lasting memory we can tell. We can tell that to your kids, okay? You can brag about that. See, I was there, not for the beautiful places, but I was there for the soul winning. Let's close in a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this opportunity you've given me, Lord, to be able to preach and, to share my takeaways for this Cebu mission trip. Lord, I pray that you would help us in this incoming mission trip, Lord, or maybe looking forward, going back to Cebu, Lord, that help us to prepare ourselves in this mission trip and also to be able to reach more people. And help us, Lord, to pray for more laborers in this area, considering these huge amount of population in these major islands of the Visayas, Lord. I pray, Lord, for the weather this afternoon, that we can also go out and do soul winning here in the metro. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.